Hey everyone, it's Justin Hillgrove from Imps and Monsters. Thought I'd try something a little different. I have done some time-lapse videos in the past, but I thought I'd actually try a little paint along. So usually I would speed up the video and everything, but this time I'm just going to do it at normal speed. So if you guys want to follow along, you can. And if you're looking for a time lapse, this is going to be a little bit boring for you. So welcome. I'm going to start with a little bit of a drawing. I thought today we would just do something really simple. The plan is to just paint a little 5x7 painting, though you can paint along at any size you want. I'm using just a kind of a pre-stretched canvas, and I've actually got my canvas already prepped ahead of time. So what I've done is the canvas, when I opened it, it was a little bit loose. So I poured a little bit of water on the back inside and kind of rubbed it in, and then shook out the extra and let it dry so that because it's cotton, so it kind of tightens it up. But you want to get that extra water out of there so that it doesn't warp the stretcher bars, which with a thicker stretcher bar like this isn't an issue. And then I've taken it and just thrown a little white and raw sienna on it as a base. And I like to do that so that you don't get the white pinholes coming through your painting. It kind of warms up the whole painting, and the paint sticks to it really nice. So I've already done that ahead of time. You can skip that step if you want. You can use a different color if you want. You can do whatever you want. So I'm going to start with a little bit of drawing. I thought it would be fun if we did something pretty simple just to start out, because this is the first time I've really done this, I think. I thought it might be fun just to paint a little forest or tree sprite. So I'm going to just start with a little bit of drawing to loosen up. I like to draw with a lot of shapes. So let's see here. I'm gonna start with a little bit of a branch for it to stand on. So I'm just gonna kind of draw. It almost looks like an antler, which is also fine. Then maybe because it'll be cropped, maybe it'll kind of leave that up to the viewer to decide what this little guy is going to be standing on. And I'm going to do just a circle for the head. I'm not going to worry about how circular it actually is. And then a bit of a triangle that kind of starts in the middle of that'll be the head there. And then I'm going to come down and put the legs up like that. And I think I'll have the arms just kind of sticking up like this. And those are going to be like little triangles. And he or she is going to have a little bit of just kind of grassy tufts growing out of the top of its head. And we'll probably put some eyes on there. And let's give it a reason for like what it's waving its arms at. Maybe like a little butterfly, which you can see I just made some little shapes there. And if you want to see what that'll kind of look like, erase that, and so you can see our basic shape. So this is going to be a pretty simple, and we're going to want to do that on here. And there's two ways you can do it. One is you can draw straight onto your canvas, and the other is you can draw onto a piece of paper that's the same size of your canvas, and then transfer that on using a piece of transfer paper. Just about any kind of transfer paper will work. If you have one sitting around, or you can even make homemade transfer paper using pencil shavings, like graphite, and I think it's some paint thinner or something like that. You can Google that, and it's like an old art school trick or something. Anyway, I'll go ahead and draw onto a piece of paper and transfer it over just so I can kind of show you the process. I'm going to put my canvas down here. And I am just going to trace it like that. So I have my size. Got a pair of scissors here. So I'll go ahead and cut that out. And I'm just going to draw the same thing onto this piece of paper. I could just set it over this because I just happen to do about the right size, but I'll just redraw it on here. So let's see, I've got my 5x7 inch piece of paper here. I'm going to draw my character first this time. I'm going to start with my circle for my head. I'm going to go a little bigger. You know what? I'm going to shift him over just a hair. All right. Because I want to put that butterfly there. So I want him just shifted over a tiny bit. And then I'm going to take my little triangle here and some little legs. And put my branch / antler that he's standing on. Put his arms up. And from a single point here, I'm going to draw almost like flower petals. So I've got my little butterfly there. I'll make little adjustments to my drawing till it looks like what I want it to. I think I'm going to put his arm here. That way he's actually reaching in the right direction. And you can see this is pretty rough. All right. I think I like that, though I think he's a little up higher than I would want him to be. I want to move him down a little bit. So now I've got my canvas. And I want to move him down a little. So I'm going to go like this. Got a piece of tape. I'm going to tape it down. And take a piece of this, which looks like I have a nice pre-cut piece on there that I've already used. You can see there's the imprint of the last piece I used this for. This is way too big, and I'm just going to cut it. I'm not going to cut it down to the same size. I can still use it for different sizes. And I'm going to trace this little guy now. And this tracing is going to get completely painted over, so I don't really need to worry about doing any details or anything like that. In fact, details are just going to get in my way. So when I pull that off, you can see it kind of shows up a little, enough for me to see what I'm doing anyway. And I'm going to want to trace that with some paint. So the next step is for me to get my paints out. So let's see here. I like to use, you need some kind of palette. You can use a piece of tin foil, a paper plate, whatever you want to, but I like to use the Stay Wet palette because then I can put the lid on if I want to. You can see mine's been much used over the years. It's got a whatever this is called, a thing underneath that stays wet, and it keeps the acrylic paper on top a little bit moist so that the paint doesn't dry out. I can keep using the same paint for weeks and weeks as long as I put the lid on in between sessions. So I've got my palette. The brand of paint I usually use is M. Graham, but I use Golden sometimes too, as well as a bunch of other different brands. When I'm doing classes, which I don't do very often, or workshops really, sometimes we'll use the Blick Studio acrylics. But with paint, generally the better quality paint you get, you're paying a little bit more, but they're more fun to use because they're going to be a lot more opaque. You don't have to deal with paint that's been watered down. There's a much higher quantity of pigment in the paint. So I've got my, let's see, I've got my brushes. I like to use these, this style is called a filbert, where it's not quite flat on the top, but you can use any kind that you want to. I'm probably going to be using the filbert a lot, and the little fine tip brush. Probably something in the middle there like this guy too. So, and most of my brushes have been very used. I'm very hard on brushes. So, but to start with, I'm going to want something like this guy here. And I'm going to want to just outline my drawing, which I will do, I'm going to do it in some turquoise because I think I'm going to make it a bright sunny day. Turquoise is a very transparent color. It's one that certain colors are going to be very transparent, like apparent, like purples, magentas, any of the blues that don't have white mixed in are going to be really transparent, no matter how much you spend on it. It's just kind of how it is. Let's see. Oh, I left my water somewhere else. I'll be right back. There it is. I got a big tub of water here. Just off camera there. All right, I've got my water, got a little bit of paint here. I'm just gonna get my brush a little wet. The more wet your brush is, the thinner of a line you're gonna be able to do. Well, let's put you here. So, and now all I'm going to do is trace it. Just pretend you're drawing with a pen. I mean, with a brush. Duh. And again, don't worry about following your lines exactly or hitting any kind of detail. These are going to be almost completely painted over pretty quick. Not going to worry about putting in my grass. In fact, I'm not even going to ink in that flower because I want to add that afterwards. And I'm going to move my butterfly up a little. All right. So now that is, now you've got it down on your canvas and you're pretty much ready to start painting. You can let it dry if you want to. And there's a couple different ways you can go from here. You can just kind of start throwing your colors down, or you can do what's called an underpainting. And just for kicks to kind of show you, I'll go ahead and do a little bit of an underpainting on this. And for me at least, an underpainting kind of gives me an idea of where my light is going to be, where my light sources are. It lets me kind of plan a little bit without having to worry about color, because the biggest thing is going to be contrast. I've noticed with paintings, contrast is kind of key for me. That's what makes a painting interesting to me, is whether or not you've got lots of lights and darks next to each other that make something pop out. So we're going to want this guy to kind of pop out from the background. We also want to make it look fairly, I don't know what you'd call that, realistic, without looking realistic. We want it to look like it could be real, but I'm not worried about actual realism. So what we're going to do for our underpainting is I'm just going to use a few colors here. That yellow you saw me put down is a Naples yellow. It's kind of a white yellow mix that I like using. It's like it warms up whatever you mix it into. Then I have my raw sienna down, which is the same color that's on here, only this is mixed with white. And I mix it with white just to make it easier to do my drawing on. And then for my dark, I'm going to use a little burnt sienna. And again, you can completely skip this step. I like to do it. It's kind of, I don't know, therapeutic. It's fun. And I've decided that my light source is going to be up here, which means I've got light kind of shining down in this direction. So everything facing that is going to be a little lighter. Everything behind it is going to be a little darker. So to show that, I'm just going to throw some of this down there. That's where on the face, on the belly, on the side of this branch, a little bit right here, and even a little along the top there. It's mixing a little bit with that blue because it's not quite dry, but I don't really care. I'll throw a little in his little hands too. And pop a little on the wings, just the tips of the wings there. All right, now I'm not going to worry about wiping my brush off. I'm just going to grab a little bit of this raw sienna. And I'm going to go kind of partway over the top and see how it kind of starts to mix with that a little bit. If you're working pretty fast, if you keep working it in there, it'll kind of blend together. That's kind of a wet on wet blending. Only really works if you're working fast with acrylics, because they dry so quickly. But I'm just grabbing some of this and I'm just gonna run it along next to it. And again, you can see it's kind of mixing a little with the blue, but doesn't matter. If you're yellow or you're white, you can use white instead of the Naples yellow. If you just use yellow is also very transparent, and it'll just make everything look kind of weird. But if this is all drying, you can just grab more of the yellow, or the Naples yellow, or your white, or whatever you are using, and just work in the other direction, and just mix it in. So, aside from not being completely necessary, this step also kind of gets you comfortable with your subject. You know, you're laying down some paint. Maybe you haven't really done any or painting or very much painting, or like me, I'll get busy with other things and I won't paint. And it's been a little while since I've painted, so it just kind of gets me comfortable diving back into the paints again. All right, so this is, you can see it already looks kind of cool. Let's grab a little bit of this darker color and we'll run it along the bottom here. Not too much, because it'll take over. And I'm just running it along wherever the sun wouldn't hit, like that back side. And now I'm going to grab more of this middle color and run it over. So when I paint, it's a little bit like I'm sculpting, because I kind of rough things in, and then I go back and I start to do more and more detail. And it's a great way to look at it. You know, don't waste any time doing any details right now. Just rough your shapes in. If you do that, it becomes less of a trying to get things perfect exercise, and more of a just enjoying the process. So that's the big thing, is try to enjoy the process. I mean, look at that. It doesn't really look like anything, but it's kind of cool, right? All right. Well, I'm pretty happy with that as far as my underpainting goes. I'm gonna clean my brush off really good. Oh, by the way, I didn't mention it, but while I was doing all that, I was using the kind of this medium-sized filbert. You can see here's the exact brush I'm using. I don't know how to order brushes or tell you what kind of brushes to get. Everybody kind of has their brushes that they like, and I have a hard time ordering them online. I'd much rather just pick them up in person, because I can take a look at them and see how big they are. Really, the numbers half the time almost seem arbitrary. So, all right, so we've got our underpainting. What do we do next? I like to work from background to foreground. In this case, we're going to keep it pretty simple, because it's a kind of a paint along. It's the first one we've done together. So I think we're going to just do kind of a blue sky. And when I say blue, I don't actually mean like a intense blue. We're actually, because we want to keep really good contrast between the character and the background, we're going to want that blue background to almost be white. Now, we could go the other way and make it a night scene, and he would still kind of pop out. But in this case, I'm just going to throw some white down. By the way, everything I'm showing you is this is how I paint. I'm sure there's other people that paint completely different than me. I am, for the most part, self-taught as far as painting goes. I learned how to painting Warhammer miniatures and stuff like that, and just kind of playing around, and then some advice here and there from other artist friends. So this is just how I do things. If you want to try your own thing, or if you're following some other method, that's totally fine too. So I'm going to go ahead and just grab some white here and just dip the end barely into this cyan, or sorry, turquoise is what I'm using. You can use whatever blue you have on hand, but you can see I barely put any in there, and it tinted it like this nice little light blue. And we're gonna go ahead and just lay it down and see what it looks like on there. All right, so something that I do while I'm painting a big area like this is I never try to mix a perfect color here and then match it here. Instead, what I like to do is use, let's see, kind of mix as I go and don't mix it perfectly together, so that I get a little bit of variation while I'm painting. That way it doesn't look perfect, so it doesn't have to look perfect, if that makes sense. There's going to be little variations of tone and color. In fact, sometimes I'll just grab other colors, like there. I grabbed a little bit of this. I'll mix that in there too. If I wanted, I could even grab just a bit of that. And throw that in there. Oops, I got it on him. Not a big deal. I can push it off of there if I want, or I can just leave it on there. I am trying to cover up a lot of my line there, because that's so dark that a lot of colors would have a hard time blocking that out. I don't know what color we're going to paint him yet, so I want to go ahead and cover it with this color, because this has a lot of white in it, and white makes colors very opaque. So and I'll probably do more than one coat on this background. Now, you can paint the sides too, the same color if you want to. I like to paint them black, but every once in a while I'll do a painting like this and go ahead and continue the branch down into the side. I would probably do that if this was coming across and I was doing the side, but since it would show up on the bottom, I think I'll go ahead and I'll just paint it black when I'm done. Gotta mix some more color here. Again, I don't need it to be perfect. I'm just looking for something that's similar to what I had. This is still wet up here, so I can mix that into what I was painting. That makes it easy. And again, I'm using this filbert. I like the flat brushes too, because you can get a nice line. See? And again, the reason I'm going so light with this background is because I do want that contrast. I want the foreground to really pop off of out of here when I go to paint that character. All right. I'll probably do more than one coat of background. I don't know if you can see it on on the film, but you can see that a little bit of that color, the raw sienna is coming through from underneath, and that's actually totally fine with me. I like how it kind of warms it up, but I will probably do a second coat over the top. Oh, his legs disappeared. All right. There we go. We've got, it kind of almost looks like a painting there, doesn't it? It's kind of fun. I think I'm going to go ahead and try to get rid of some more of this blue line here. That way I don't have to struggle with getting rid of it later. Same with on this branch. All right, now if you try to work a section of paint that is at a certain stage of drying, it actually starts to lift up. So sometimes it's best just to let it finish drying and then just go back over the top. So for now, I'm going to go ahead and stop. I'll let it dry, and we'll call that good for this session. Thanks everyone for joining me. We'll do some more in a little bit.